Johnny Depp's $650 million Vanish Act is real, and tonight we're walking you line by line through how it happened. The number is an internet myth. It comes straight from on-record reporting that he earned roughly $650 million over the peak years of his career, and that almost all of it evaporated. Per a June 21, 2018 Rolling Stone profile, the fortune that blockbuster hits created largely no longer existed. That's the headline. The story is harder, and the receipts are messier than a single villain or a single bad decision. Most people think the money disappeared because a shady manager siphoned it off, and that's the end. That narrative is clean and comforting, and it lets us imagine that if we simply avoid bad people, we avoid bad outcomes. But the reality is more forensic. A high-octane spending engine running at $2 million a month, legal warfare on multiple fronts, taxes and penalties compounding in the background, and a Hollywood cash flow model that pays awe-inspiring grosses but leaves surprisingly thin net margins after everybody else takes their cut. If you've ever wondered how someone can earn like a studio and still cash flow like a startup, this is your case study. Here's the plan. First, we'll break down the lifestyle burn rate that court filings and sworn statements put on the record, the jets, the properties, the wine, the cannon. Then we'll do the part almost no one wants to do on camera on math. We'll convert gross to net the way an entertainment lawyer or business manager actually would, so you can see why $650 million is not really $650 million. Third, we'll look at the lawsuit he filed against his longtime business managers in 2017, the countersuit that put his spending in public view, and what the confidential 2018 settlement really tells us. Finally, we'll show how the later legal battles, including defamation trials and lost opportunities reportedly worth 8 figures, lock the story into place, even as a massive fragrance deal years later proved that brand value can rebound. 3 questions answered by the end. What happened to the money? Why didn't someone stop it? And how do you keep this from happening to you? Let's start with the pressure hose that never turned off. According to a 2017 cross-complaint by the management group, the firm that handled his finances for years, Depp's lifestyle cost over $2 million per month to maintain. The filing itemized categories the public rarely sees in one place. More than $75 million to acquire and maintain roughly 14 residences from Los Angeles to the south of France, an estimated $18 million for a yacht, 6-figure monthly security, hundreds of thousands for full-time staff, and a wine habit that, depending on who's talking, ran from $30,000 per month to much more. The cross-complaint also claimed $3 million to fire Hunter S. Thompson's ashes from a cannon. The numbers are jaw-dropping because they're not a movie montage, they're recurring, fixed-cost obligations that don't care whether a film is shooting or a deal is delayed. The payout here is simple. A $2 million monthly lifestyle equals $24 million a year, and that alone can strip decades of work down to the bone when paired with taxes, fees, and downtime. But the second reveal is bigger than the first. The $650 million figure most people quote isn't a bank balance. It's lifetime gross earnings before the Hollywood food chain takes its slices. Agent commissions, manager percentages, lawyer fees, publicist and security retainers, payroll taxes, and state and federal income taxes move first, and they move automatically. Use conservative industry math and watch the pile shrink. A top agent at 10%, a personal manager at another 10% for certain deals, lawyers taking 5%, are billing hourly on big matters. Then call it 40+% in combined taxes at the high end, depending on domicile and deductions. If your pre-tax is $650 million and you strip away standard fees and taxes, the theoretical net available to spend might be closer to a third. And that's before you factor in penalties if taxes are paid late, interest on loans used to bridge cash flow gaps, or investment losses on assets you decided to buy versus rent. According to his own lawsuit, Depp alleged that taxes were mishandled, that loans were taken out without his approval, and that he trusted signatures he didn't fully parse. The payout to the section is the uncomfortable truth. You can't lose what you don't really net, and the public headline number hides the private arithmetic that actually pays the bills. Now to the fight that dragged all of this into daylight. In January 2017, Depp sued his former business managers for fraud and mismanagement, alleging unauthorized loans, missed taxes that triggered millions in penalties, and conflicts of interest. The firm countersued within weeks, blasting his spending as reckless and insisting they repeatedly warned him. That countersuit is what gave the world those itemized lifestyle numbers, because once it's in a cross-complaint, it's in the public record. In mid-2018, right as a magazine profile turned the dispute into cultural theater, the case quietly settled. No courtroom verdict, No legal finding that one side stole and the other didn't, just a confidential agreement, and both parties moving on. Here's what that actually means. Settlements don't prove who's right, they end risk. They stop legal fees from stacking like cordwood and prevent depositions and documents from airing more laundry. By the time you've paid litigators, accountants, and PR handlers through a year and a half of trench warfare, the process itself becomes a cost center. The settlement wasn't a win in the moral sense, so much as it was a tourniquet. The payout, whatever was true before the case was filed, remained true after, but with the added drag of legal bills, reputational damage, and zero chance of rewinding the clock on financial decisions already made. If you think the storm ended there, the next wave hits harder because it's about opportunity cost. In 2020 testimony in a separate proceeding, Depp said he discovered the $650 million he'd earned had been lost, with tax issues compounding the pain. Then in 2022, his agent testified in the Virginia defamation trial that a long-standing $22.5 million payday to reprise his most iconic role evaporated as the studio changed direction. Think about that in the context of cash flow. Even if the check wasn't in his hand, a studio-level commitment is the kind of guaranteed future income you can borrow against or plan around. Once it disappears, lifestyle costs don't politely scale down in sync. In parallel, his business manager testified about a six-figure wine bill that had to be negotiated down and paid, which is a reminder that vendors don't accept vibes, they require settlement. The payout is a principle most people only learn the hard way. Big reputational shocks don't just reduce your current income, they can erase signed or near-signed income and ignite a scramble to cover yesterday's obligations with tomorrow's money. There's also the misunderstood role of taxes and penalties. When you're salaried, your employer withholds taxes automatically. When you're paid in lump sums for films, endorsements, or back-end profit participation, you're responsible for timing those tax payments perfectly or eating penalties that can reach seven figures overnight. Court filings and reporting at the time reference late tax payments and associated fines. Pair that with high-interest bridge loans used to float the machine between projects, and you've got leverage working against you. It's not that the income wasn't real, it's that the timing mismatches and financing choices amplified every mistake. The payout is boring but lethal. Taxes are a cash event, and interest never sleeps. So who try to stop it? Here's where human nature beats spreadsheets. Advisors can warn, but they can't unplug the jet. Managers can recommend asset sales, but they can't force an A-list actor to unload a cherished property if the artist believes a comeback is one roll away. In statements at the time, Depp's camp said his spending was his business and that he'd been misled on key issues. His managers replied that he refused cost-cutting and signed off on expenses he later disowned. Two narratives, no trial verdict, and a close settlement. The payout is the pattern you see with many high earners. As long as checks keep clearing, lifestyle costs ladder up until they're structural. And by the time everyone agrees there's a problem, the machine has its own momentum. Now the part that complicates the cautionary tale, brand gravity. In 2023, he signed what multiple outlets described as a record-setting men's fragrance deal to remain the face of a luxury scent he'd fronted for years. That payday, reported at well over 8 figures for 3 years, is proof that in a hit-driven industry, narrative can reverse and cash can return. But here's the nuance that matters. A fragrance contract is incredible money, yet it's also taxable, fee split, and finite. It doesn't cancel a decade of burn or convert back into the homes you sold. It buys time and stability, if you let it. The payout is not everything's fine now. It's, if you get a second wind, don't rebuild the same storm. So what actually burned through the $650 million? Start with the conversion from gross to net, subtract the industry's standard cuts, layer in a $24 million yearly lifestyle, add legal costs and reputational losses that close doors worth 8 figures, then compound it with taxes, penalties, and interest. That is how you take a once-in-a-generation income and still find yourself asset-rich and cash-poor, then forced to liquidate the assets. Notice what's missing from that equation: a single dramatic theft. This isn't a heist movie. It's a case study in how Hollywood money is earned, how it leaks, and how it can disappear even when you're still famous. If you're watching this as a fan, the emotion is understandable. You want the hero to be wronged by a villain so the story feels tidy. If you're watching it as a builder, the lesson is different. A system that rewards you with rare, huge checks is exactly the system that demands discipline on the boring line items. The documents from 2017 and the testimony scattered through 2018, 2020, and 2022 aren't gossip, They're ledgers of what fixed costs and legal risks do to even the biggest paydays. The response from his side throughout was consistent. He blamed mismanagement, denied the worst characterizations of his spending, and ultimately settled to stop the bleeding. That's not an admission of guilt. It's an admission that time and attention are money, and when you're hemorrhaging both, you buy peace. Here's what matters now. The forensic story of the vanished fortune makes perfect sense once you stop treating $650 million like a savings account and start treating it like a waterfall that pays everybody else first. The big checks you think make you safe are often the very reason you overbuild your lifestyle. The lawsuits you think will make you whole often cost you the years you needed to rebuild. The PR wins you celebrate on the way back don't retroactively pay old tax penalties. The receipts say all of that out loud on record. One last takeaway from the inside of this business. Star power is a currency, but cash flow is still king. When the brand is hot, set rules you'll keep when it's not. Cap recurring costs at a percentage of rolling 12-month net, pre-fund the tax bucket on every deposit, and firewall your legal budget so you can't spend tomorrow's comeback defending yesterday's choices. None of that is glamorous. All of that is how you make sure the next headline about your money isn't about how fast it vanished. And if you stay for the next story, we're going to map this exact playbook onto another A-list fortune, the one everyone swears could never disappear, and test whether the receipts tell a different story or the same one. For the full series, start with our fresh Celebrity Tea playlist, where every episode is built like this one: expectations versus reality, receipts up front, and payouts that actually answer your questions.